visions that he gets from God about what is to come. And there has been no lack of study on eschatology out of these chapters, out of chapter 7, 8, and 9, about what's going to happen, how it ties in, and it's very specifically tied into the book of Revelation. How John's revelation is, in some ways, just an exact retelling of some of these events. We'll talk a little bit about that today. But I think there's something interesting about how Daniel is written, and that it's not linear. What I mean is it's not sequential. You don't have this year, it's all about this year and events of this next year. So what we get in chapters 1 through 6 are Nebuchadnezzar's reign, and then through his son, and in chapter 6 we get into the reign of Darius. Well, in chapter 7 we go back in time to Nebuchadnezzar's son Belshazzar. So 1 through 6, kind of linear, kind of sequential, and then 7 goes back to the Babylonian, the times of the Babylonian captivity before they're taken over by the Medes and Persians. Does that make sense? It does to God. For whatever reason, he put it in this order. I don't know why. But we go through these events that show the sequence of the kingdoms as they come and go. And then we get chapter 7 where God gives, it's a recording of God giving Daniel this vision back 30 years ago. After chapter 6, or before chapter 6. So, chapter 7, we begin in verses 1 through 8, talking about the vision that Daniel's given of the 4 beasts that come out of the sea. Now, most scholars believe that these 4 beasts are the same nations or kingdoms that are listed in Nebuchadnezzar's vision of the great statue. Same ones. The same beasts representing the same countries, the same kingdoms. And you get to the last beast, and that's what we're going to be talking about in our lesson today partially, is the last beast that comes out is the Proto-Roman or the Roman Empire, and it's destroyed, and then there's a horn left. And that horn symbolizes strength, and that horn has a mouth, and it speaks. Okay. Allegorical, strange imagery, Daniel's full of. Again, very similar to these themes and images that we see in Revelation. Some of them are an exact parallel. So, we have this horn beginning to fall or is fallen, and we have this vision lesson today, the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man. So the Ancient of Days, we equate to God the Father. That's the Father, that's the one that was from everlasting to everlasting. And then you're going to have the Son of Man. Now, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. The lesson said it multiple times. How many times does Jesus refer to himself as the Son of Man? 80. 80 times Jesus refers to himself in the New Testament as the Son of Man. His most, endearing name for himself, as the Son of Man. So, when he says that, he literally ties himself to this prophecy in Daniel. By calling himself the Son of Man, he equates himself to the Son of Man listed in this prophecy. There's no wonder that the Jews thought he was black. There's no wonder that the Jews, who didn't understand who Jesus was putting himself, they thought he was putting himself on a pedestal. Because the Son of Man is this critical character in this prophecy of Daniel. So, that's the head. That's the heading. That's how we get into this. It sets the background. So we're going to see Daniel in this vision, in this first part of it, second part of it actually, seeing the Ancient of Days. So who would read that first section from our lesson today, beginning in verse 9 and going through 10?
I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. But judgment was set, and the books were opened.
Oh, okay. So, right. So Daniel has this vision of these creatures that are not human. They're partially human. They're animal. They're strange for us to even imagine what they look like. They're coming out of this water, and each of them gets defeated. And now he sees thrones being placed. Now, the word cast down there, we kind of think that has a negative connotation. I don't believe it is. In ESV and other translations, it says they are placed. They're placed there. These are the thrones, and I believe these are the thrones found in Revelation of the 24 elders. This is that throne room where God's throne is in the middle, and the other thrones of the 24 elders are around. So don't think that these thrones are being destroyed when it says cast down. It really means that they are being placed strategically around the throne of God. So when those thrones are placed, we get a description of the Ancient of Days. Jessica, do you remember when we had Hannah's class? Hannah, you may remember this too. When we had them draw out what the throne room of God looked like. Do you remember that activity?
Yes.
We had people try to draw out with the sea of glass and the different candlesticks and all the different things that are surrounding the throne and the elders. It was a long time ago. It's probably 15 or more years ago. So trying to get a picture of what this throne room and what God himself looks like is a bit of a challenge, even for Daniel who's experiencing this vision. So it says he's sitting, right? So God is anthropomorphized as a human that sits, right? We know God is a spirit. God has never been seen, but in Daniel's vision, we have God sitting. Okay. Human capability of him sitting, who has what? Tell me what his characteristics are. There's only two, I think, listed.
None of its actual description of him himself. It's his hair and his robe.
Hair and his robe. That's all we get, all right? We see that he sits. He has hair. What's his hair look like? Yes! Benny was talking about gray hair a minute ago. There's honor in graying white hair. Even God has white hair. Happy. Happy. It makes me happy. And what about his robe? What's it made of?
It just says white as snow.
It says the hair of his head was like pure wool, which we know his head was wool, but it was white. And his garment was white as snow. We have no idea what it was made of. We don't have any clue on what this. But what do we know about it? That it is pure, white as snow. What does that indicate for us? What does white indicate?
Purity.
Purity, holiness, something separate and set apart. Jessica's dad and us went to the barbecue on the river yesterday. And Jessica, what did he wear?
A white shirt.
A white polo shirt, exactly like Mike Gentry's.
Who did?
Jessica's dad.
And ate barbecue.
And ate barbecue at barbecue on the river with a white shirt. Okay, so white clothes in Scripture represent stuff that's been set apart, usually with the priestly class, to be used in acts of worship and acts that are set apart from the normal people. And they're kept white. I don't know how they kept them white. They did awesome jobs cleaning them, but their part of their uniform was white. So the picture of Jesus and the picture of God having white indicate that purity of personhood, that purity of character, that holiness that they have. So when he sits, what does he sit on? A throne. What do we read about the throne in verse 9? It's not like you would see Game of Thrones or any of the stuff where people have like a big iron or concrete or stone place to sit. What is the characteristics of it?
It's got wheels.
And wheels. What do the wheels echo? What do they call us to? It's a book right next door to Daniel. Ezekiel. It's the vision of the flying wheels with the four ministering angels that are there. So we have this throne. Ezekiel written contemporaneously. We have Daniel there writing the same thing about the throne of God having fiery wheels. I think of Johnny Cash. I don't know why, I think of the Burning Ring of Fire. I just think of that song when I hear these wheels and these things that are kind of beyond us being able to understand. That's not a throne that we would picture in anything that we've ever seen. It's so different. What is the fire? If this is allegorical in a way, what does fire represent? Just like the white of the garments in his hair represent holiness and purity, what does the fire represent as part of the throne?
Purification, judgment.
Judgment, says in Psalms it says our God is a consuming fire, and that's part of his judgment, right? Also, the purification act, fire is used to do what?
Remove the dross.
That's right. In metallurgy, it's used to separate the true metal from what's not, right? Anything that's not, the fire is used to do that. So what we're going to see here is that being true, all those things, that God is holy and pure, and that his judgment is going to be exacted on these kingdoms of the world. So just this picture of God is an allegory of what he's doing. His purity, his holiness, and his judgment on these nations. The ones that have come before, and finally on this last one that's represented by its horn that is speaking. So, okay, that's God and his throne. Verse 10, set the scene for me there.
The stream of fire issued and came out from before him. Did you want me to read verse 10?
Yes.
1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened.
Fiery stream of God's judgment comes out. Again, that's that judgment. That's that separating the pure from the impure.
I picture that like lava
Could be
flowing.
lava. That's a good. A stream of lava.
Fire hot enough to melt rock.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that.
Can you imagine? Okay, you've seen these pictures in, say, Hawaii, of how it just comes out and there's nothing that can stop it. It just has to go. You just have to get out of the way. If you can get out of the way, that's the only thing you can do. So this stream, these streams of fire and lava or whatever it is, come forth. But before him in this assembly are whom? What does the lesson say there? All right, I put a question mark beside it. Lesson says they're angels. Lesson says they're angels. You go into Revelation and you see all of the martyrs who are before the throne. The 10,000 times 10,000, those who have been martyred for the cause. At this time of judgment, there are the martyrs that are before the throne as well. So you have all kinds of folks that are there. We do have angelic beings that are in heaven. We know that. We've seen that in all kinds of prophecy and visions of heaven. So I think it's a mixed group. I think we have the 24 elders. We have those that have died in their faith. We have angelic beings that are without number who are there ministering to God. So this is a big deal. I don't know if there's anything we can equate this to in a human mindset. When a king is coronated, it's been a long time since we've had a really big coronation. You think about Queen Elizabeth when she was coronated back in, was it 40 whatever, 50 whatever it was, I don't know. But all the world watched it on TV and there was tons of people there, thousands of people. We can't comprehend what millions of people and beings, angelic beings, at this throne room, all there to minister to God. And as they're ministering to God, what's God doing? What's he preparing to do here at the end of verse 10?
He's got a book that's open.
A book of what?
For judgment?
It's for judgment, yes. What are the contents of said book? Chris had a really good answer, I think. We don't know. Say that again.
This is plural too, books.
Books, yes. Books.
Never really said books.
Yes. Lots of books. Yeah. We've got our lives. We've got the lives of those around us, all recorded in these books. All the words that we've spoken, we're going to be judged by. Doesn't that make you feel really comfortable? Aren't you at ease in your spirit knowing that you're going to be judged by the words or for the words that you've used over your life? That every one is recorded in a book?
Yeah, the works can be good or bad.
It works. Yeah, you're going to be judged. Everybody's going to be judged. Now, we have an advocate. Thank God we have an advocate that is on our side. That's going to be the Son of Man here in just a minute. So the books are opened. This time of judgment is beginning. And now in verses 11 and 12, we're going to hear the beginning of this judgment time. So who would read verses 11 and 12?
I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time.
Right. So, God's judgment is on the nations. Daniel is observing this in this vision. This horn that speaks, and the voice of God does what? It destroys the beast. The burning flames that we just read about from the throne and proceeding from God destroy this fourth and final beast. He's destroyed, but somehow his voice, through the power of whatever's in that horn, the representative of the power of that beast, still is speaking. Now, the way that's written, we see that this voice and these great words are not pro-God. They're against God. It's something that sets itself up against God, and that's why it's being judged. Is that this last beast with this last horn has set itself up in competition or in conflict against God. Now, the beast is destroyed. That nation or that kingdom is destroyed by that burning fire of God's judgment. The horn is still speaking. Now the rest of the beast, and this verse 12 I think is very interesting. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away. If we look at the first prophecy that Daniel had of the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, talking about all the different nations that would come and go, each of their kingdoms was taken away from them. Right? The Babylonians passed on to the Persians, who passed on to the Greeks, who passed on to the Romans. That happened, right? We see that their kingdoms are taken away, but it said their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Back to eschatology, we can look at the season and a time and maybe talk about dates and talk about how long these nations have their influence prolonged. There's one way to look at it. I'm not qualified to look at it that way. I'm not prepared to look at it that way. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying the dates and times things kind of blow my mind. But one thing that I think, and the lesson brought it out, is that we still have influences from each of these kingdoms that exist in the world today. What kind of influences do we have from the Babylonians today? Let's go to the first one.
I think very little from Babylonian. Persians have a lot of
Absolutely. Language, math,
architecture,
architecture.
Greek philosophy.
Okay. Romans' form of government and military.
These are republics, supposedly.
Yeah. So Babylonians, I would say that there's polytheism is probably still active. There's still quite a bit of that. Babylonians, again, focused on intelligence. I think there's a spirit in the world that gives a form of idolatry to intelligence and learning. I believe that still exists today. I believe you go to a university, you'll see a lot of that. And again, no offense to university learning.
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah, I know. But you do have many universities that focus on the act of learning for learning's sake and putting people on pedestals because they've learned certain skills and certain arts. And I believe in our society that's still part of the Babylonian culture. A lot of even designs of things fall back on the Babylonian style. A lot of the architecture and they were known for their buildings. So, all of those cultures still have remnants that exist today. So, I think that we constantly have to fight against the influence of those cultures in our society. Whether it's the Greeks or the Romans, the Babylonians, the Persians, there's all kinds of influences that try to pull us away. As we read Colossians, that is some of the mentality of Gnosticism, of mysticism, of legalism, and go back to all these different ways of living that represent these other countries, these other kingdoms. So, the horn has no remorse for its speech, and God takes care of those kingdoms. And as God is judging those kingdoms with the fire that proceeds from the throne, Daniel is given yet another vision, and this is of the Son of Man. This is not a separate vision. This is a continuation all within the context of this throne, this judgment throne. So the last two verses in our lesson are verses 13 and 14. And they give us the identity a little bit, or the behaviors of this Son of Man. So who would read the last two verses in our lesson today?
So in the night vision, when behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed.
Thank you, Deanna. So tonight, what we're going to do a little bit is take a look at the parallels between this vision of Jesus coming down in the cloud and Daniel, the Son of Man, and Jesus in the cloud from Revelation chapter 1, chapter 19, chapter 20, chapter 5. We're going to look at those revelations of Jesus as they compare with this revelation, with this vision of the Son of Man. I like how verse 13 starts. I saw in the night visions. Like I said a minute ago, this is a continuation. This isn't a separate event. This is within the context of the other visions. It's not separate from them. It's part of them. In the night visions, and one like the Son of Man. So let's talk about that title, Son of Man. Literally, what does that title, Son of Man, mean? C.S. Lewis used a similar term in his Narnia books.
Son of Adam.
Son of Adam, right? In all the Narnia books, the humans were called sons of Adam or daughters of Eve. So they had them, that's how C.S. Lewis used the literal term. We are children. We are the legacy of Adam. So we're born of a woman, so we are the Son of Man. That's how that works, right? What does Jesus say about the Son of Man? What does that title mean for him? This person that's coming in this cloud of glory.
In Mark, he says, Jesus said, I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven.
Mark 14, 61 through 64. Thank you, Mike Gentry. Jesus says, as the Son of Man, He is this character. In Mark, he refers to himself as the one that's coming in the cloud and will sit at the right hand of the Ancient of Days. That's what Jesus says. If anybody says Jesus says he was just a guy, or he was just a man, or Jesus never set himself above anybody else, they're wrong. Because Jesus literally says that he is this Son of Man referred to in Daniel chapter 7. I'm sorry, Daniel chapter 7. Sitting beside the Ancient of Days. It's literally what verse 13 says. He came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. In Mark, Jesus says, I'm going to be seated at his right hand. This is none other than Jesus identifying himself with that. No more powerful statement about Jesus' identity anywhere. Verse 14, we're given some of the characteristics of his rule. Someone tell me what Jesus' rule, as the Son of Man, who sits at the right hand of God the Father, what does his rule look like?
Never ending.
It doesn't end, that's one. Everlasting dominion.
He gets everything, everybody, all people, nations, languages. It's the whole world.
Why is that important? Why is everything, all people, all nations, all languages will serve him, and his kingdom is everlasting, dominion is everlasting? Why is that important, and where do we hear that theme in the New Testament? We studied it last Sunday.
Every knee shall bow.
That's part of it. That's, to me, that's one of the main things, is that we hear Jesus and everyone else say that. Paul says, every knee shall bow. What else? What about a characteristic of Jesus we heard in the sermon last Sunday? One word starts with the letter P. Preeminent. Preeminent from Colossians chapter 1. Jesus is over everything. This Son of Man in Daniel chapter 7 is given authority over everything. Everyone, everything, forever. When Paul says in Colossians, to him who is preeminent, all things are held together by him. All things exist through him and in him. We as the church are knit together in him. Those are the terms that Paul uses in Colossians to talk about the dominion of the Son of Man. We can identify Christ's preeminence through Daniel's prophecy about the Son of Man. Now, when is that going to come? Trick question. When?
We don't know.
When did Jesus become preeminent?
Always.
He always was, right? Why don't we live like Jesus is over everything? Why does the world continue in sin? Why do we struggle in our lives and in our faith? Why is Jesus not preeminent in my life? What hasn't happened yet? We just read about it in Daniel.
Still, the Satan's right now.
At Satan's right now. That judgment that we read with the fire coming from God, we're waiting on that. We're waiting for that purification. We're waiting for that cleansing of the sin in our lives and in the whole world. We're waiting for that. That judgment, John saw it, is yet to come. It's coming. We've got to be ready for it, but it's not yet. So, the preeminence of Christ in our lives is something we have to grow into. It is an act of sanctification that's ongoing. But for the world, for it to happen, this fire is required.
I was reading something this past week where it said of all the craziness that is going on right now, that the least surprised should be Christians. And one of the reasons why is because of what you said. We know how this thing ends.
Yeah. It's going to end with fire. It's going to end with judgment.
Why should we be shocked, really?
When
I heard
we-
you guys talk about oil companies and all that stuff.
It should not shock us as we see society
It
going.
breaks your heart, but it doesn't.
I see Israel right now with threats from the north and the south.
And universities.
We're going to talk about universities again. We're gonna bring that up.
Well, there are, and some of these are protesters, they nearly killed some Jewish kids the other day.
Yeah. For nothing other than the fact that he was.
Jewish, they asked them that, and he said yes, and they started beating them.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. You have these Palestinian protesters that did that. So we are in, I believe we're in the last days. We can point to the signs. We can see these events that have yet to occur in history, and we can wait for them with expectation, but also with a sense of sadness for those that are going to experience the wrath of God. I have a sadness for that. I want people to not experience the wrath of God. I want people to be redeemed and turned away from their sins and find life and hope in this Son of Man. That's what I want. But we know that's not going to happen. We know for a lot of folks that will not happen. So, I like on page 51, as we start to close up the lesson for today, concerning the kingdom of Christ, right in the middle, it's the answer to one of the questions, question 9. Concerning the kingdom of Christ, there's both a present aspect and a future manifestation. Since God's kingdom is present in Christ, there's a sense in which the kingdom came during his earthly ministry. Many references, however, look forward to the future kingdom, having both earthly and eternal manifestations. This future aspect of Christ's kingdom is likely what is primarily in view of Daniel 7:14. I believe it's both. I believe it's both future and current. I believe as a church, we get to experience what it's like to have Christ's dominion over us now. To have Christ as our head. Go ahead, Mike, you were going to say something.
I always go back to Psalm 110, especially when we get to eschatology stuff. It says, the Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. It's a process, I think. He
Yes.
is at the right hand of the Father right now.
Yes.
Uh,
This is ongoing.
Yes, it is a process. Things are moving in God's direction.
Always. Always moving in God's direction.
He's not shocked either.
No, none of this that goes on surprises our God. I'll go back to the idea that the church should live under the dominion of Christ, right now, as our King and as our Lord, both now and eternally. And I think sometimes where we fall short is that we don't give him that rule. It's a voluntary rule, right? We give this to Christ. He doesn't extract it from us. He doesn't say, Michael, you've got to do this right now or I will throw you in a fiery furnace. He's not that dictator. The charge is on us to allow him to have that dominion over us. Again, I believe this is the ongoing part of that will be fulfilled in the future 100% when he comes back in glory. We look forward to that, and it is yet to come. So tonight we're going to talk about Revelation chapter 5, chapter 4, chapter 1, chapter 19, chapter 20, as it applies to these few verses in Daniel chapter 7 about Christ coming in the cloud of glory and what that throne room and that judgment seat looks like. So, be ready for that tonight, and we will be dismissed. Hi, Brother Bob. Hi, Miss Carol.
Pardon my interruption.
None at all. No pardon needed. Adam, you close us with a word of prayer.
Lord, thank you so much for this lesson. Lord, we may not understand every aspect of it, but we also recognize that we don't need to, Lord. We know that you're God, and your will be done in all things. Lord, just ask that you go with us and worship this morning. May it be pleasing to you. Pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Now, I didn't have anybody that I knew of